He's Popeye the Sailor Man. He lives in a caravan. He opens a door and falls through the floor. He's Popeye the Sailor Man. What the hell is going on?
Mind your head, Popeye! Mind your head!
I'm not Popeye, I'm Zoe.
You were playing a game about Popeye and singing about Popeye. That's close enough for me. I'm not picky.
Where are you getting all those skulls from?
Never you mind.
Some days I just wonder why I bother.
So does everyone else.
Well, that, if I'm not mistaken, is the sea hag from the Popeye comics. Popeye was a very popular character from the very early days of newspaper comics, back when the newspaper would have the news, the comments section, the sports pages, and the funny pages, where you would have a strip of basically a few cartoons and comics. There was something for the adults, something for the kids, a little bit of light entertainment. So, originally though, Popeye wasn't the main character. He was a guest star in Thimble Theatre. If you don't know what that is, it was a comic starring Harold Hamgravy, yes, that was his name, and Olive Oyl. Olive later dumped Harold, she was originally his girlfriend, and got with Popeye the Sailor Man, so once that happened, Harold's time in the paper was basically over. That's why the game's not called Harold. How did you get in here?
I let him in. This show needed a guest star, someone with real clout to get the audience in.
And you thought a 93-year-old sailor would do that?
Hi, I'm right here.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Just go with it, will you? There's an arcade game and 3 versions for the home consoles of the era, and Popeye's here to help you talk about them.
Yeah, let's get to it, will ya? I've got other shows to pop up on after this one, you know.
Fine, fine. If I review your game, will you help me out with the sea hag?
Oh, she's easy to sort out. Just punch the skulls when she throws them, and you'll get extra points. Watch.
That's not fair.
Neither's your face.
I'm not going to stand for this. If I'm not appreciated here, I'll go elsewhere. I could have been a star, you know.
Oh, I don't doubt it. A star's just a giant ball of gas, and you've got that in spades.
Screw you, sailor boy.
Join the queue, lady. Okay, she's gone. You ready to start the review?
A deal's a deal. Let's get started. Here's Popeye on the NES. Popeye was a launch title for the Famicom in Japan, along with Donkey Kong and its sequel, Donkey Kong Jr. While all three are highly polished games, you could be forgiven for thinking that they all feel very similar, an issue that was raised during the original release of the game in the arcades. Electronic Games magazine outright stated that it was a derivative of Donkey Kong, which is a little harsh, but it should nevertheless come as no surprise to anyone who knows the history of that game. Basically, Donkey Kong is the first draft of Popeye, but apparently Nintendo couldn't get the licensing sorted in time, so they switched all the characters out for their own in-house designs. Bluto became Donkey Kong, Olive Oyl became Pauline, and Popeye became Jumpman, who later became Mario. When Nintendo got the licensing sorted, they suddenly found themselves with a license, but no game. So what's an arcade company to do in that case? Well, switch the sprites back to how they were intended? Could do.
No, of course not. They're going to make a whole new game just for me.
Damn right they are. And they'll get it ported to every home system under the sun, too.
Got to give the public what it wants.
The game is fairly simple, with 3 levels to progress through before the game loops back to the beginning and increases in difficulty. There's the opening stage on the docks, the town stage, and then out at sea on a sailing ship, which I'm going to assume is the Spinnacher, Popeye's trusty vessel. On each level, Popeye has to collect a certain number of items that fall from the top of the screen to the bottom. On level 1, it's hearts thrown by Olive Oil. On level 2, it's musical notes from Olive singing. And on level 3, it's rungs of a ladder that Popeye needs to build in order to rescue Olive.
You'd have thought I'd be able to just climb the mast thanks to my amazing muscles. But apparently not.
If the items reach the bottom, Popeye only has a small amount of time to collect them before he loses a life. Collect enough items and the level ends, moving the action on to the next one. Bluto is here on every level, trying to prevent Popeye achieving his goal, because Bluto is a prick. He has several methods of attacking Popeye, ranging from punching him in the face if he grabs Popeye on the same platform, to reaching down from a higher platform so he can throttle Popeye, or leaping up from a lower platform to grab Popeye by his unmentionables.
And yet you'd still mention them. What's going on there? Shut up.
Popeye can grab a can of spinach to boost his strength, giving him enough power to punch Bluto so hard he'll bounce around the screen. It's a fun move, but the spinach doesn't regenerate very quickly, if at all, in some versions of the game, so you'll need to time grabbing it precisely, otherwise you'll not catch Bluto before the spinach power runs out. On each level, there are 2 hazards. The Sea Hag will throw skulls at you from one side of the screen to the other, and she'll appear on either side in rapidly increasing progression of difficulty, because that's how the game works, is how it makes it harder. Meanwhile, Bluto is going to throw beer bottles at you, and he's going to do it really, really fast every time he sees you.
Punch the bottles out of the air for extra points!
And so you don't get hit by them. Getting hit by them loses you a point. On level 2, the Sea Hag also throws skulls, but level 3 mixes things up a bit by having the Sea Hag throw skulls while a giant bird will attack. That's fun.
Don't forget the punching bag.
I was just getting to that. There's a punching bag on level 1, which can drop on Bluto's head for extra points. It's a one-time event, and it's very easy to miss your strike, so practice will definitely make perfect on that one. Level 2 replaces the punching bag with something easier to handle. Sweet Pea is floating from a balloon, bobbing up and down at the top left of the screen. If you can time your jump on the seesaw that Wimpy is standing on, you can jump high enough to reach Sweet Pea, which gets you extra points. Level 3 doesn't have any of that, you just have to punch the bird for extra points.
Animal cruelty for high scores!
In all honesty, the comparisons to Donkey Kong are a little harsh with this game. This is closer in style to Donkey Kong Jr., with all of its clear progression of the climb and dodge gameplay. And to be honest with you, it's still a lot of good fun now. If you get a chance to play the arcade game, do definitely take that chance, because this is a real classic from the early arcade era.
But the question is, did it survive being ported to the home systems?
Let's find out. In a word, yes. When ported to the NES, Nintendo made sure to keep everything intact. This is one of the original black box titles which launched at the dawn of the NES's life. And it's clear Nintendo were trying to make this as close to the arcade experience as possible. The graphics are wonderful, albeit not quite as detailed as those in the arcade, but they work very well, and it's very clear what everything is. All the levels are here, although, let's face it, there weren't that many, so cutting 1 or 2 out would definitely have stood out, and there are 2 gameplay styles to choose from, which give veteran players more of a challenge. If there's one criticism I have for the NES version, it's that Bluto doesn't feel quite as aggressive here as he did in the arcades on the standard setting, but when you play on the alternative version, he's definitely more like his arcade counterpart. That gives the option of a nice introduction for new players, which is great, but veterans won't find that much of a challenge on the first version. The controls are spot on, I can't fault them. If you want as close to the arcade experience as you can get on a home console, the NES version of Popeye is the game that you need. I can't fault it, it's one of my favourite games on the system.
Is that why you bought it twice?
Well, to be fair, I didn't realise I had. But it's true, I actually do have 2 copies of Popeye on the NES, but one of them is a weird ROM hack. This is Popeye on the N Joypad, a Famiclone system with a load of built-in pirated games. The controllers for it are low budget, but they do the job well enough, and it's a surprisingly fun system to play on, as mentioned in my review of the system in episode 77. It contains a copy of Popeye, but most of the graphics are altered in a very slapdash attempt to hide the fact that the game is pirated from Nintendo. Popeye on the N Joypad was renamed to Let Loose, which makes no sense at all, but the gameplay is still here. In this version, you're a pig, and you're trying to dodge a conspicuously aggressive tramp while you collect falling items. Also, Olive Oil is now a penguin, because why wouldn't she be? And nothing else makes sense. It's a weird looking mess, but it plays well and it's still fun. This was the first version of Popeye I ever played, and it made me a fan of the game. So it's clearly doing something right. The fun and the quality of the original Nintendo port is still there, despite the change in the weird graphics by the pirates who slapped this version together. If you get a chance to play this version, it's worth it, but I wouldn't go out of my way for it. So, shall we move on? Yeah. What's up next?
Have you played Atari today?
Have you been waiting a long time to say that advert?
All day.
Let's play! The Atari 2600 is one of the oldest consoles around, often regarded as the console that started the home gaming revolution, and with good reason. It's nevertheless a very early example of 8-bit gaming, and that's why its games often look so primitive. This is a surprisingly good port of Popeye from the arcade, however. The graphics are all blocky and solid colours, even though the Atari can absolutely use multicoloured sprites if you know how to code it. Just take a look at Commando on the 2600 for an excellent example of that. There's also a fair amount of sprite flicker, since the 2600 doesn't have hardware sprites, and also doesn't have a very fast processing speed. Combining both of those means the system doesn't have enough cycles to overwrite a sprite with the background in quick enough time to hide the overwrite and redraw cycle that allows sprites to move. That's not a criticism, however. For example, I've done that in some of my games. You see some of my early basic attempts at games, you'll notice a lot of sprite flicker. It's just because there isn't enough time in the cycles to be able to overwrite properly. It's not a criticism, it's just how it is. Atari games have a fair amount of flicker. It's just one of the things you have to live with when you're playing Atari. The sounds get annoying, especially the walking sound. I've never been a fan of audible walking sounds on early games because it's just annoying blips and clicks. The Popeye theme tune, however, when you grab a can of spinach, is really well done. The Sea Hag is here, and a lot more aggressive from the start than she was on the NES, and all 3 levels are present, although there has been a significant alteration to the town level. The basic mechanics of the town are the same, but Sweet Pea is gone, Wimpy is gone, and the level now has 2 trampolines, making it symmetrical. The changes aren't a deal breaker by any means, but some of them are questionable, like the need to make level 2 look exactly the same on both sides. What's that about? It's a weird design choice, but the core essence of Popeye is still here, so that's great. If you have an Atari and don't have access to Popeye on the NES, this is a very good alternative.
What about Atari's rival, the Chucklevision?
You mean the Intellivision?
I thought that was a kids' TV show.
No, I think you've been drinking too much.
Don't try to change me, Hammer Girl. I am what I am.
As you would expect for the first 16-bit console, the Intellivision boasts more colourful graphics and better sound than the Atari. Despite this, Olive Oil is still a single colour, barely defined sprite, which makes her stand out. Weirdly, in fact, compared to the full-colour Popeye and Bluto. Everything plays really nicely, and this is a near-perfect conversion from the arcade original, although Wimpy is still missing. I have to say, near perfect because Sweet Pea is missing from level 2 and the Sea Hag is far less aggressive on the Intellivision. Despite these downsides, Popeye on the Intellivision is a fun version of the game. I wouldn't put it on top of my list of preferred versions, but it is a good one, and until I got a copy of the NES version, it was my personal favourite. If you get the chance, try to give it a try. It works surprisingly well, even on these weird disc-shaped controllers. Look at that. What's that about?
So is that all of them? Are we done with the home ports?
Well, no. There are other versions, like the Commodore 64, the Odyssey 2, the Texas Instruments, and others as well. There was even a mobile phone version later on.
So are we playing any of those?
Sadly not. I don't actually have copies of those ones, and I can't play them if I don't have a copy. There is one more game that I do have, though, so shall we have a look at it? Long thought lost, the ZX Spectrum clone of Popeye was uploaded to World of Spectrum in September 2020. This isn't an official port as far as I can tell, it's more like a fan clone of the game. Nevertheless, the levels are all here and they do look great. It's a far more difficult version of Popeye than you would expect after playing the other ports, but the core feel of the game is still here. Popeye looks great, even if his name is misspelled on the title screen, and this feels very much like a Spectrum port of the arcade version, only with a higher difficulty setting. It's fast, it's fun, and I'm actually glad it was eventually tracked down because it is good to play it, and I think we'll all enjoy it. All in all, Popeye made the transition from the arcade to the home computers and consoles incredibly well, although it was somewhat derided as a Donkey Kong clone, which I think is unfair because it is its own game with its own charms. It's still good enough to keep people coming back to it after 40 years from its release. I mean, I'm still playing it here. It's still great. Or, you might even say, it's strong to the finish.
It must eat its spinach.
It's Popeye the arcade game. If you like the show, please consider supporting me on Patreon. It really does help create future videos. That's patreon.com/Zoe kirk-robinson. And I've got an extra special thanks going out to Chief89, Sam Yates, Retro Mickey 82, Mo Henry, and George Bortorini. Thank you so much, guys.